I know that the world is an uncertain place right now, that many families and communities across the globe. And we were obviously living elsewhere as well, so we were never really all together in the same place. But whenever we had the family moments and we met up.
Forget the secret estates and sealed trusts you might have seen floating around online. The real story of Prince William's property life over the last few years, and the real friction between him and Queen Camilla's side of the family, is stranger and more human than any invented scandal, because it actually happened, and it happened in plain sight, confirmed piece by piece through named royal correspondence, palace statements, and reporting from outlets like Reuters, CNN, Fox News, and People. This is that story. It starts in 2022, right after Queen Elizabeth's death, when William, Kate, and their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, left their London apartment at Kensington Palace for a much smaller home on the Windsor estate called Adelaide Cottage. Built in 1831 for Queen Adelaide, the 4-bedroom cottage had once been a favorite retreat of Queen Victoria, whose dog is even buried on the grounds. On paper, it looked like a downsizing choice made for the children's sake, close to their new school, away from the crowds of central London. In reality, the years the family spent there turned out to be some of the hardest of their lives. It was at Adelaide Cottage that Kate was treated for cancer after her diagnosis became public in 2024, before she announced she was in remission in January 2025. William has reportedly described that period in blunt terms, telling people close to him that the Adelaide Cottage years felt cursed, and that the experience left the family mentally scarred in ways that had nothing to do with the size of the house. By the summer of 2025, reports began surfacing that William and Kate were looking to leave Adelaide Cottage behind for something bigger. The property most often mentioned was Fort Belvedere, an 18th-century Gothic revival mansion tucked into a hidden corner of Windsor Great Park, sitting on 59 acres with a swimming pool, tennis court, rose garden, greenhouse, stables, and its own slice of royal history. Fort Belvedere is where Edward VIII famously signed his abdication papers in 1936 before leaving the throne to Mary Wallis Simpson, which made it an oddly loaded choice for a future king to even consider. Royal sources at the time said the couple felt they had outgrown their 4-bedroom cottage and wanted more space, particularly for Charlotte, an enthusiastic tennis player who would have had a court of her own. Other options were floated too, including Royal Lodge, the 30-room mansion where Prince Andrew has lived with his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson, and even a wing of Windsor Castle itself, but neither of those paths worked out. Andrew reportedly resisted pressure to give up Royal Lodge, and the Windsor Castle option was said to no longer be viable. In the end, the family settled somewhere else entirely, Forest Lodge, an 8-bedroom house also within Windsor Great Park, which they began describing as their forever home. William and Kate moved the children in during their October half-term school break in 2025, timing the transition so George, Charlotte, and Louis could settle in without missing class. They reportedly moved in nearly 2 months ahead of the original schedule and threw a small party for the builders and staff who had rushed to get the house ready. The relocation wasn't without real-world consequences for people outside the royal family either. 2 households living in cottages near Forest Lodge were asked to vacate their homes ahead of the move, though reporting at the time noted there were no formal eviction notices and that the tenants relocated to comparable or better housing elsewhere within the Great Park. For a family whose brand has always leaned on relatability, that detail was a quiet reminder of just how much practical machinery moves behind the scenes whenever senior royals change addresses. Forest Lodge gives William and Kate something Adelaide Cottage never really could: distance. It sits deep enough inside Windsor Great Park that the family can, in theory, live something closer to a normal life away from constant public view, while still staying close enough to Windsor Castle and the children's school to keep their routines intact. Friends of the couple have described it as a long-term decision, one meant to give George, Charlotte, and Louis a stable base to grow up in rather than another stopgap home, especially as George edges closer to his teenage years and, eventually, his own constitutional role. It's worth noting that none of this involves some mysterious inheritance from Queen Elizabeth or a secretive trust structure. Windsor Great Park has been Crown estate land for centuries, managed through entirely conventional, yet famously discreet, royal household arrangements. There was no leaked backdated paperwork, no unnamed insider leak channel, just a fairly normal, if extremely well-resourced, family deciding they needed more room and eventually finding it. The path to Forest Lodge also says something about how differently the Wales family and the wider institution now think about property compared with a generation ago. When William was growing up, moves like this were rarely explained to the public in any detail at all. A family simply relocated, and the reason stayed private. By contrast, the Fort Belvedere speculation, the Royal Lodge dead end, the Windsor Castle wing that didn't pan out, and the eventual settling on Forest Lodge all played out across months of on-the-record and source-based reporting, with royal correspondents tracking each option almost like a running story. That shift matters, because it means the real drama here isn't hidden behind sealed trusts, it's sitting in plain view, a young family balancing privacy, practicality, and a very public microscope, choosing a home the same way any growing family might, just with vastly more scrutiny and vastly more square footage. While William's real estate story was playing out fairly straightforwardly, a separate and genuinely documented tension was building between him and Camilla, one that has surfaced repeatedly in reporting from multiple outlets over the past year. The clearest example involves a wedding, not an estate. When Peter Phillips, Princess Anne's son, married Harriet Sperling, a dispute reportedly broke out over whether the bride would be allowed to wear a tiara from the royal collection. According to reporting picked up by outlets covering the wedding, Camilla's office effectively blocked Harriet from accessing a tiara tied to Anne's side of the family, a decision William reportedly disagreed with. Sources described William as wanting Harriet to at least have the option, on the grounds that decisions about the royal vault should rest with the king or with William himself as the future monarch and a direct descendant of the family, rather than with Camilla, who joined the family through marriage. The dispute reportedly became a real point of tension in the run-up to the wedding, with one insider telling a British outlet that everyone around the couple was surprised to see William and Camilla clash so openly. Harriet ultimately wore a tiara from an independent jeweler instead, sidestepping the standoff, but the underlying friction over who actually controls access to royal heirlooms didn't disappear with her. That same undercurrent resurfaced again in the summer of 2026, in a much more emotionally charged setting. On July 10, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and their two children, Archie and Lilibet, traveled to Highgrove House in Gloucestershire for a private reunion with King Charles, their first time seeing him together in roughly 4 years. The visit coincided with Harry's trip to the UK to mark the one-year countdown to the Invictus Games. Buckingham Palace confirmed the meeting took place, and multiple outlets, including Reuters and CNN, reported that Camilla was present alongside Charles. What made the moment especially fraught, according to several separate reports, is that William and Kate were reportedly not told the reunion was happening until after the Sussexes had already left the country. Instead, William and Kate spent that same afternoon at the DMI Royal Charity Polo Cup in Windsor, a scheduling overlap some royal watchers suspected wasn't entirely accidental. According to people close to the family cited by Vanity Fair and other outlets, Camilla had actually been staying at her own home, Ray Mill House in Wiltshire, when she learned the meeting was happening, and drove to Highgrove in a hurry to be there for Charles, whom she reportedly saw as needing support given how difficult the relationship with Harry has been. A source close to Charles described the whole arrangement as deliberately last-minute and cloak and dagger, orchestrated by the king himself so that word wouldn't leak before the Sussexes arrived. One version of events, relayed by an insider to Radar Online, quoted Camilla as saying she went along partly to keep an eye on the meeting and on Meghan specifically, someone she has reportedly never fully trusted. Whatever her actual motivation, several reports agree that William reacted badly once he found out, with one source describing him as feeling that Camilla had inserted herself into an extremely sensitive family moment without his knowledge or approval, calling it a classic case of her trying to divide and conquer. Royal author Catherine Mayer, speaking to People, offered a wider frame for why Camilla keeps showing up at the center of these moments. In her view, Camilla is simply a fixed, non-negotiable part of Charles's life at this point, and there is no version of reconciliation with the king that doesn't also involve her. That's a very different read on the situation than revenge property plays or shadow empires, but it captures something real, a genuine, ongoing power dynamic between William and his stepmother over who gets a say in the most sensitive corners of royal family business, from wedding jewelry to secret family reunions. Notably, this wasn't the first time Charles had arranged a private meeting with Harry's family without bringing William into the loop. CNN reported that the last previous contact between Charles and Harry had come the previous September, when the two had tea together at Clarence's house, itself the first time they had met in more than a year, and before that, Harry's most recent visit had come back in February 2024, shortly after Charles's cancer diagnosis became public. Seen against that pattern, the Highgrove meeting looked less like a one-off slight against William and more like part of an ongoing, deliberately narrow channel Charles has kept open to his younger son, one that Camilla has consistently been part of and William consistently has not. It's worth stepping back and noticing what these two storylines, the real one about Windsor Great Park and the real one about Camilla, actually have in common, because it's not hidden estates or fabricated trust documents. It's a family working out, in fairly ordinary and occasionally messy ways, who gets to make decisions as generational power shifts. William and Kate's move from Adelaide Cottage to Forest Lodge was about carving out stability and privacy for their own children as William's future role comes into sharper focus. The tension with Camilla, whether over a tiara or over being left out of a reunion with Harry's family, is about the same basic question playing out on a more personal level, as Charles's reign continues and eventually gives way to William's, who actually controls royal access, royal symbols, and royal relationships. Camilla has spent more than 2 decades moving from outsider to queen consort, and by most accounts she has no intention of stepping back from that role quietly. William, for his part, has made clear through his actions, whether refusing to attend a secret meeting with his brother or pushing back over jewelry protocol, that he is not interested in simply deferring to her. None of that requires an invented 500-acre woodland empire to be interesting. If anything, the real version of this story is more revealing than the fictional one, because it shows a family negotiating ordinary tensions, over privacy, over trust, over who gets consulted, using entirely real tools, press statements, scheduling, silence, and the occasional very public snub. William didn't need to inherit a secret estate to send a message about where he stands. He sent it by moving his family somewhere quieter, by staying home during his brother's reunion with their father, and by pushing back, in full view of royal reporters, over something as small and as symbolic as a tiara. There's also a broader backdrop worth keeping in mind. Charles has been managing his own cancer treatment since early 2024, a fact that friends say only sharpens his instinct to see his grandchildren while he can, even if it means keeping his elder son and heir out of the loop on a given afternoon. That same context helps explain why Camilla has taken on a more visible protective role around Charles generally, whether that means driving to Highgrove at short notice or weighing in on decisions about royal jewelry and access. From William's side, the same backdrop raises the stakes on every one of these smaller disputes, because each one now doubles as an early test of how much authority he'll actually hold once his father's reign ends. A disagreement over a tiara or a reunion he wasn't told about might look minor in isolation, but taken together, they read as a preview of how William intends to define his own relationship with Camilla once he is the one making the final calls. That's the version of this story that's actually happened, and it's still unfolding. What do you think comes next for William and Camilla as Charles's reign continues? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.